Okay, so today, hopefully you're here for the power of partnership, multilingual and special education. Today I am alone, which is so unusual because this is the team that I usually work with for all of this. And if any of you did our bridge series, when we did bridge between multilingual and special education, either last winter or the winter before, you have seen me with Laura Begley and Pam Cunningham from WRESA Special Ed and Zeinab Haidous, who is my partner in crime in the multilingual department. I am going to be advertising today a little bit because we have a half day session coming up in October. So that is on the slide deck, and we will be, giving you some links and things on the slide deck to register for that as well. If you look, I'm sorry, the link again, if you look here, if you can go to tinyurl.com/blitz partnership. And if not, I'll just drop the clickable link into the chat later. Okay. So here, this is often how people come into kind of the mix between the multilingual and special education world, no matter if you're from gen ed or from one of the specialized areas. Unfortunately, this is usually what happens. There's this moment of panic. Oh no, we've got this kid, or we're worried about this kid, or someone's telling me about this child or this student. Oh, they have some paperwork from another country and it's in another language, or they have nothing but their teacher is saying they're not making, reasonable progress. Just wondering which of these characters and their thoughts is resonating with you the most. And just drop that in the chat if you would be so kind. And I will drop that attendance link one more time in case people have missed that as well. What is it like in your context? What do you usually see? I love the rut row. Okay. I love me some Scooby. And yeah. 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 I had to actually remember her name. My daughter's a lot older, so my Disney characters that I remember are more like Mulan. But to go to Frozen, which I love, but I was like, oh, which one is she again? She's not Anne, right? Yeah. But oh my gosh, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Right? Yeah. Yeah. And it's always that frustrating piece of often, even if we're all great specialists in our areas, even being able to communicate with students in their first languages, right? That might not be part of our repertoire. We're very lucky when that is able to happen. So today, these are our objectives. That first one, maybe I should have said begin to understand the unique needs of multilingual learners with exceptionalities, but we're going to take a bit of a look at that. We also want to look at some strategies for effective collaboration among educators, and that would be from our special education world, our multilingual world, our general education world, and any other people that I am hopefully not leaving out right now. But we all intersect and overlap, right? And we all have strong areas of expertise that we can really support each other in these collaborative environments, and through that kind of collaboration really support our students. And we're going just to be able to see a few tools for assessing multilingual learners with suspected disabilities today. Now, here is my big pitch, and I will, even though this is on the slide deck, I will also, where did my chat go? Sorry, everybody. I will drop that direct link in there. This is a palette that we keep updated at WRESA, and everything that you see here, even some things that have separate links, should be found on this Padlet as well. So all of our resources and things will be found there. And that is the link on this deck as well. Any of you who have done anything with us in the last year know, or the last 6 months, this collaboration, we share the students, collaboration for multilingual learners with exceptionalities by Dr. Honigsfeld and Dr. Cohen. Again, Dr. Honigsfeld being from the multilingual world and Dr. Cohen being from the special education world. Is just a brilliant, brilliant book. When we talk about some collaborative possibilities, one could even be to do a book study with some people in your school or district or PSA with this, right? And a lot of these, and I do cite, but a lot of these are coming right from are coming right from this book here. Now, there's another opportunity, and there's a registration link later on this deck as well. And we are doing a half-day session on October 2nd from 12 to 3 p.m. And I promise you that my entire team will be there. So you will have representatives, again, Laura Begley and Pam Cunningham from who are WRESA special education consultants, and Zeinab Haidous and myself who are multilingual consultants. Was we really obviously believe in collaborating with each other, just as we are hoping you'll be able to do in your context as well. Today, I blame the summer. You've got me on my own. I will say that all this material has been pre-approved by my team fully. So this is a graphic that's coming right out of that Dr. Honigsfeld and Dr. Cohen book that we just saw. These kind of graphic is on the collaborative instructional cycle, and you may have seen it in other contexts as well, because of course it doesn't just relate to multilingual and special education and our collaboration and intersection in these worlds. I'd like to go over a little bit as you're looking at this slide, just the reminder of the whys of why each part of this cycle is so important. When we're looking at collaborative assessment, having people and educators with different expertise and perspectives in the assessment process makes it so much more richer, and hopefully in the end also much more accurate and precise. For the reflection piece, obviously thinking deeply about our practice and its impact on student learning is vital. For that collaborative planning, it really is that part that connects the co-assessment or the evidence of student learning piece with the co-teaching part, as the planning hopefully is informing your instructional decisions that you're making. And collaborative instruction, if you think about it, we often think of our groups separately. Like if I think of multilingual learners and someone else might be thinking about students with IEPs, that they need consistency and continuity and supports and scaffolding, right? So if we really combine them, and when we have multilingual learners with exceptionalities, they really are the students who require the most consistency and continuity. They need clear and easy to follow expectations, and they need rigorous and well-supported instruction. So that's the importance of this piece there. What I found interesting about what Dr. Honigsfeld and Dr. Cohen did with this piece was, even though, okay, like it is a cycle, the arrows go around, you can be at any point and even sometimes backtrack, right? So there really is no starting point. However, when we usually see this cycle, it does usually start with planning. And the authors of this book made a deliberate choice to start with assessment. Again, there's not really a step one, but we're always putting something in that upper left-hand corner, right? And they wanted to focus on that collaborative assessment piece because you're really identifying student strengths and areas of need, right? You might be looking at, like when we look at suspected disabilities later, like what is, even when you have a student who has been evaluated and is a multilingual learner with exceptionalities, what is still due to difference and what is due to disability, right? And all of that, even as you're working with them, even if we have identified needs that go beyond their language learning and language acquisition needs, right? This is the stage, where later we end up co-creating an IEP that we are hoping is going to address all of their needs, including any, special needs or disability needs. And then, of course, their English language needs as well. And then it's also the point where even beyond formal assessment, the different kind of things we're doing throughout the year, these periodic reviews that really will represent or capture rather the fluid nature of culturally and linguistically responsive teaching, as something can go, a student might be shifting in their needs in those areas as well. So here, again, coming from this, my new favorite book. I think this is my book prize of the year as far as all the things I've been reading this year. But these are some considerations that will help capture the fluid nature of culturally and linguistically responsive teaching and learning, right? So one of the things that, of course, your ELD or your English language development or multilingual staff, whatever they are called where you are bringing is really thinking about these multilingual learners in terms of the stages of language acquisition. Where are they in there, right? Knowing what their proficiency levels are in their home language as well as in English, and how long they've been educated in English. When we talk about things, especially in terms of evaluation, obviously, if we can do some sort of evaluation in someone's native language, that can be very powerful. Yet we also have to see, I mean, if a student was never learning about multiplication, and say their native language is Spanish, just because I speak it here and can give a good example. If they've never learned multiplication in Spanish because they were not in school at that time, or they moved to the US before they were at that grade level where they would be taught that, it doesn't matter how much I say, bueno, vas a multiplicar tres por dos, y como sabemos, it doesn't really matter. I can translate that all day. But if they didn't get the concept in their native language, then that's not going to help. So you also have to, of course, get in these different case-by-case situations where you're really trying to tease out, okay, if they only learn multiplication or were exposed to it in English, what did that look like, and what did they know, and what could they take from it? And where can the home language support? Like maybe at sort of a tier 1 level is explaining that you're, putting things into groups, and they're groups of the same number. Like we have 5 groups of 3, 5 times 3, or whatever it is. But it's all this part of really teasing this out. We do have students with limited and interrupted formal education, which gets tricky. Those students are referred to in the multilingual world as SLIFE students, students with limited or interrupted formal education. We usually don't call a student SLIFE, even if they've missed some time. It's really much more predominant in secondary. But we can talk about that in elementary as well. It just, we tend to use it more for secondary students who might not have foundational skills for literacy or math, even in their home languages, right? Experts on those, again, is going to be your multilingual and ELD staff, right? So the other thing we sometimes need to look into when we're working with multilingual learners, either with suspected disabilities or already identified with exceptionalities, is looking into their identities, right? Across their languages, across their cultures, and across their experiences. Even the students I just mentioned before, the SLIFE students, they come with experience, right? And they've also come often from a lot of hardship, and will have some very big strengths like resilience. How often do we talk about building grit and resilience in our students, just as a general topic in education over the last decade or so? And these students, they have it, right? They might be missing some other things in areas of need, but resilience they've got. So, looking at all of those things and trying to look at an asset-based view and see how all these things intertwine and connect, right? As always, looking at their developmental milestones and trajectories, and really being able to have a good trusting relationship with the family where they feel comfortable, telling you all these things, right? Understanding family backgrounds, and what the expectations are in the home, what the expectations might be as far as students taking care of younger siblings or working, all these kind of things. And then again, any kind of trauma that they might have gone through. And we can talk another day about just looking at everyone through a trauma-informed lens, in the sense that nobody owes us their story. But again, building those trusting relationships can kind of get at that eventually, with that kind of finding out about needs in that area. Again, something else I love from this book is we can kind of look where our students with exceptionalities are in these different quadrants. So for this one, students can move about. You would expect them to, especially as they acquire more English, right? You might go from a high English language need to a lower English language need. This graphic or a system or framework rather, is meant to be flexible, but also offering a baseline measurement for consideration there. Again, looking at students and seeing how they might move through that. It also kind of opens you up to this idea of conducting different kinds of classroom observations across multiple settings. So what does the student look like in their gen ed classroom? What do they look like in the unified art settings? What do they look like in their bilingual or English language development ELD classroom or setting? What, if they have been identified, what do they look like in their special education setting, right? What can they do within and across these different settings? Oh, and another big point before I go on to the next one, I almost forgot, is that if you do really want students to shift quadrants, this is where also collaboration around specific instruction will be very helpful. So there's another framework from WIDA. This is the Advancing Altella Toolkit, which honestly, in all transparency, I just started to go through. I've been through some different pieces of it, but it's looking good. In general, Altella focuses on multilingual learners with significant disabilities, but I think some of it can be applied, if you kind of back up to students with other kinds of disabilities as well. So you have access to all of this. Now, they also use this framework, and then they have kind of an additional piece. So this is just one example from that toolkit. This is someone who would be in the quadrant of high language needs, but low disability related needs, right? And you can see all kind of the rungs on that rainbow. Honestly, it kind of makes me want to shift this graphic so it's more horizontal to read. Maybe I'll make a different one sometime. But what they do in this toolkit, which is kind of nice, is so if you look at the outside rung, that is like the initial interpretive piece for the student, then the initial expressive, the medial interpretive, medial expressive, advanced interpretive, advanced expressive, right? So again, what you're looking at here is someone who does have a disability, but has more low disability related needs, right? And just higher language needs. But then they give you some kind of student profiles, like from each quadrant. So like for a student with high English needs and high disability needs, for instance, for that first rung, that first initial interpretive rung, they're talking about students using eye gaze to match a picture of a season with a corresponding word or another corresponding picture that goes with that season. So it's not super in depth, but it does give you some examples of what students in each quadrant might be expected to do on these rungs. And even though I would even like to see more, um, I hadn't found anything like this, believe me, in all these years. So I think this is a good tool, at least to start and start wrapping your mind about this with multilingual learners with exceptionalities in the different quadrants. The other thing that Altella brings up a lot about is no matter where you are, always asking yourself two questions, right? And the first one is, how are students accessing information? And then how are students demonstrating their understanding and showing growth? And this fits in very much with when we are talking about multilingual learners without disabilities. We talk a lot about meaningful access to core content, and that's all around comprehensible. We call it comprehensible input and scaffolded output. And I'll show you that a little bit later. But all of that is tied in to exactly that, but just reframing it in a little different way for students with special needs, right? So again, how are students accessing information and how are they demonstrating their understanding and showing growth? I'm going to leave you these slides more to look at maybe a little bit more on your own. But again, this book has a lot of great visuals and also just text around having these student-centered collaborative discussions, right? So students in different areas share characteristics and they also, of course, exhibit unique variations. And all of this is collaboration is just really start open dialogue where the different educators with different expertise are asking each other's questions, learning, reflecting, right? Um, so the next two slides are kind of showing some of the questions that could be asked of educators in different specialty areas. So on this first slide, because it is so text dense, this is a lovely, in the book, it's a lovely four quadrant visual again, but it's so text dense that I've divided into two slides, right? So when we say ELP level, that is the English language proficiency level of the student, right? So that is a great question for an English language development or bilingual teacher. How much growth has been noted? How much growth is expected across the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing? Which language domain is a strength and which needs more support? What are the most impactful strategies that support language and literacy development? And what can the student do academically during their stage of language development? There are also a lot of tools, some of which I'll show you on the slide deck, and there are more on the Padlet around gearing instruction to the English language proficiency level of students, right? For special educators, right? Are there any specific aspects of the student's development to be aware of? Right, there are so many things, of course, that can enter into here depending on the disability, right? How is the student best able to communicate with teachers and peers? I will quite frankly admit I'm very much an expert in the multilingual world, and though I'm getting better at understanding things in the special education world, I didn't know when I was looking at those rungs that they were going to go to eye gaze as an example. I'm like, oh, right. But again, that's not part of my experience. So that is a great thing for me to be learning from other colleagues that I have or from reading, which is also why I'm kind of pushing this idea of a book study, doing it together, right? How does the student's disability or disabilities impact learning? What are some strategies to support the student across content areas? And this to me is the interesting part because we've got most impactful strategies on both sides. How many would be similar? How many you might be able to remove the scaffold sooner or not, depending on the English language proficiency level and depending on the type of disability the student has, right? Are there any specific instructional routines you recommend? Again, everyone should be knowing that IEP, as we know, but how often does that happen in practice? So what does it include? And again, we're getting in the areas of strength and unique ways the student is successful, because that might look different. In the multilingual world, they asked about the domains because we're very much focused on success in each of those domains, right? But there might be other things too that are strengths that we also need to be able to focus on. And finally here, we have what to ask classroom teachers. Well, of course, very often these students, again, it would depend on the disability, but maybe spending the majority of their time with the classroom teacher, right? They may be fortunate enough to be in a co-taught classroom with the multilingual specialist or the special education educator, right? Specialist there as well. But again, what does it look like from their perspective? And you have the questions there, right? As the person who spends the majority of the day very often with our students. And then just general questions around what to consider to optimize instructional success that could really come from anyone. And again, it's not to say that any of these questions have to be in a specific quadrant, but I really think dividing it out this way kind of helps the collaborative conversation get started. And in most places, I would say in my experience, both when I worked in district and now working at the county level, that most of these conversations are just getting started. So I think this is great support around that. So coming from here, jumping to another place here, I'm going to show you two slides. This is the first one on some different collaborative possibilities. And I know this is a Summer Blitz is more of a webinar form for the most part. But if you don't mind dropping in the chat, as you look at this slide and the next slide, as we kind of go through, have you tried any of these different kinds of collaboration? What ones might you have tried or might want to try in your context? And then I want you to do just a little bit of thinking around who might you partner with to make it happen? Because we advertising our October half day, ideally we want you to have collaborative teams, right? And I know most educators want them, and a lot of people feel very isolated and siloed, like in that one of our first slides when it was like no more silos, right? So sometimes you don't feel like you have a lot within your sphere of influence to get this started, unless perhaps you're an administrator. But who might you partner with? Because maybe it's just one other gen ed teacher at the school and, one other teacher in the LRC, that maybe you can get together and start talking about these things. So as we go through them, just kind of think about that. And if you don't mind dropping in the chat, I don't mean like to name it, you don't have to say Tammy next door to my room, but just like, I might reach out to, the ELD teacher at my school, or I might reach out to, the classroom teacher who I know has worked successfully with a lot of my students, or whatever it is, right? Um, so here we go. One of the good collaborative possibilities is creating district protocols, and we'll show you an example of one later in the session that is available on the Padlet via Oakland Schools. Uh, One of the things that we find is, again, what you end up with this panic, like we saw that first slide, because you don't have these protocols in place. And the district I worked in, like the kind of collaboration that happened, or if there was sort of an informal protocol in place or not, depended on the building you were in. And of course, it should not depend on that, right? Even if something starts well in a building or is piloted into building, it needs to get to be district wide, right? So one thing you could think about is, setting up some collaborative conversations about sharing expertise and sharing common understandings and branching out. And okay, so what do we do when we get a student? What might that look like, right? And we do have like one that's actually very good that of course you don't have to use, but it's a great launching point if you want to develop a district protocol for yourself. Another great opportunity would be to create a resource bank, right? Again, in my experience, like I've done SIOP, a Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, which has a lot of great strategies and features and things for multilingual learners. And I've often had, special education educators there who are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I do that with my student, or I do this, but I change it this way, or, or that would be great for my students as well. So even though there are some unique things that might be different, there is a lot of overlap in strategies. So really creating a kind of resource bank. Like if we say that, sentence stems and visuals are helping all of our students both read and interpret material, and also being able to demonstrate understanding via speaking and writing about it, right? So, um, if we have like when I have a resource bank that's on a shared Google Drive, or however your district or PSA likes to do things, that we could kind of collaborate around. Um, Again, multilingual learners with IEPs. What are we doing to support our multilingual learners with exceptionalities? I have been guilty of this myself, especially with a student who maybe has significant disabilities, being like, wow, everything I do, they don't understand. I'm just going to let the CSI teacher just completely take over. And it's not that she shouldn't or shouldn't be primary, but I can't just like say, okay, and, and leave. We need conversations around how to best support students. And I will have right now we're also working on that at the state level with a bunch of different consultants from districts and ISDs to try to support more with that, what that might look like, especially with students with significant disabilities. I would say that universal design for learning is very good. I think for everyone, but I think especially taking into the consideration of student needs, whether it's students with disabilities or IEPs, or students with language needs such as multilingual learners. What does that look like so that we can really, really make our tier 1 instruction extremely strong and powerful, right? Some more collaborative possibilities. So thinking about your sphere of influence, both professional and personal. And personal, I mean like in your personal life, but also maybe personal at work, like who do you hang out with in the teacher's lounge, or, who do you like to talk to? And just kind of thinking about how can we bring different people together. And I'm sure I've left someone off the list, so my apologies in advance. But thinking about who in special education, do we need to have here at this table? Who of our English language development bilingual educators? Who from the core content and gen ed areas, right? And then trying to really get everybody else, administration, interventionists, instructional coaches. And again, if I've left your role off, my apologies in advance. And then a huge, huge plug, and I do know we have at least one administrator in the room, is that we need system support for all of this. We need to be able, whether we're doing this via PLCs, we need some sort of work time. I mean, we will to support our students as educators often go above and beyond and just kind of figure this out on our own. And when I was saying, who might you partner with that is doing it on your own, but hopefully what we're trying to get to is a whole systems of support where we really have time to delve into this together. Um, because we really do need, I mean, if we're going to be co-planning and co-assessing and all these things, we need the time to be able to do that, right? I'm looking on here. I got some people thinking about who they might contact to do things with. Yeah, any adult in the building who had a strong relationship with the student the prior year. Excellent. So that's also kind of following the student, right? And I think that that is absolutely excellent. And I'm also going to put in a plug, since I'm putting in a systems plug right now when I happen to read that comment, is we could also have systems of thinking when we're thinking about placement. How can we place students so that we can make the most of these instructional teams, or these collaborative teams that could be guiding their instruction, right? I'm a big fan of co-teaching, but if you can't co-teach, can you at least have some systems time, integrated to co-plan? And to co-reflect, right? So all these kind of things. And thank you for reaching out to your social workers, right? They often are a great bridge between, I think, the special education department and gen ed and multilingual and everybody else, right? They often do a great job of liaising between the two groups. So over here now, a little bit more in the multilingual world. This is the framework where I like to place everything that's going on there, right? So we have this framework at the top. Pretty much everything that I do with schools and districts and that I really see happening within them is in one of these three areas. One is English language development, or ELD. So you have your specialists, your teachers, whose primary responsibility, I mean, they might be supporting with content, and there is so much to be said for integrating language and content. That's huge and hugely important. But their primary focus when they're doing that is on language and on English language acquisition, right? Um, then we have what is everybody, but really falls to tier one most of the time, is that meaningful access to core content or meaningful access to curriculum. And of course, all of this must be happening in a welcoming and access-based environment for students and families to feel validated and to really get the most out of your students, right? And support them in being successful, both academically and otherwise, right? Again, I have a plug on here for Universal Design for Learning. But as part of that meaningful access to core content, we have those two areas of comprehensible input and scaffolded output, which Tella kind of turned into those very similar questions we saw earlier. Comprehensible input for multilingual learners, I just have a few examples there, like visuals and graphic organizers, maps and label diagrams. There's so much around that too. And scaffolded output would be, how are you providing scaffolds so that students can demonstrate their understanding, right? Uh, Sentence stems, sentence stems, sentence stems. They aren't on that particular Padlet as much, but I've got other resource Padlets that have a lot of those to help for both speaking and writing. Paragraph frames, again, the graphic organizers, visual representations, models. These are just a few examples, right? There are more. So Michigan is a WIDA state, and WIDA has a lot of resources around supporting multilingual learners. They have something that are called the can-do descriptors, looking at what students can do at each English language proficiency level and in each domain. So what you're seeing there is a little partial piece of reading and writing for grades 2 to 3. And with they also talk about key language uses, which have changed a little bit. Recount is now narrate, but anyway. You can use this to see what you can expect right now and what kind of support students might need to be able, if they are at that English language proficiency level in that domain. But you can also use it as sort of a Vygotsky +1, right? Look at the zone of proximal development and see what they can be doing and what you should be aiming at, and they can do soon with a little more support. For students with more significant disabilities, there are the alternate can-do descriptors, and these are new. And they are also on the Padlet, and you can also link to them there and have an idea of what that might look like. WIDA divides things. Kindergarten is separate, first grade is separate. Then they cluster grades 2 and 3, cluster grades 4 and 5. Then they cluster middle school 6 to 8, and then high school 9 to 12. So when you're looking at all these kind of different things around that, that's how you'll see it laid out. Over here, and again, access on our Padlet as well. But a big issue in the state of Michigan, in our county, across the nation, is both the over and under identification of multilingual learners as students with special needs, right? So I took this out of, there's the Office of English Language Acquisition has a toolkit. I believe it's still up on the Department of Education website, but I am not sure. It's also on our Padlet and things. We have it in many forms. It just looks better, I think, when it's actually coming from the governmental agency. But that is one of the links to that. Chapter 6 is about students with suspected disabilities. I'm sorry, multilingual learners, of course, with suspected disabilities and or with exceptionalities, right? Um, so some of that verbiage on the slide from there is coming directly from that chapter. So basically what it's telling you is you cannot delay an evaluation because of a student's limited English language proficiency, nor can you accelerate an evaluation from something that ends up being due to that. So that puts us all in a really tricky place. But one thing I want to make really, really clear, this whole idea that someone has to be here 3 years or that there's a certain amount of time before you can look at them, no, it's just not true. So this is where these collaborative teams become so, so important because for most it isn't easy. I will give you an easy one though that kind of helped me sort it out about why. Like if you have a student come in with a seeing eye dog and a walking stick, are you not going to, help them with their visual impairment just because they don't speak enough English yet? Well, of course not, right? Another thing might be, and I did have a student like this, a stutter. He stuttered in Albanian as much as he stuttered in English. So right away, we've got something here, right? And yeah, we have to figure this out and how we're going to do this because the English language proficiency level makes working with him more difficult. But you can't just say, no, we're not going to help you with that until, you have a few years of English under your belt. Okay. But obviously, most cases are a lot trickier than that. So there are some tools, both from the feds and also from other sources on there to help you with things. So one of them is, I think it's tool 2. Yes, I wrote it right there. So if you're in that chapter, it is tool 2. It's pages 6 to 10, and it goes through different areas. And it lists all these behaviors. Now, all of the behaviors could be due to English language development or language acquisition, or they could be due to a disability. So it's teasing out the why, which can get tricky, but that's what we do, right? So if we're looking at this one, for instance, okay, if we have a behavior, they don't remember letter sounds from one day to the next, okay? So what's the difference? Well, if it's due to language acquisition, they're going to have a lot more difficulty remembering in their second language, which we're assuming right now is English, which of course, by the way, it could be their third, fourth, or fifth language. But anyway, in the English language, right? Especially if they differ from letter sounds in L1, right? But with repeated practice, they get it, right? So then that's due to second language acquisition. But if they don't remember letter sounds, even if they're common between their first and second language, it may be due, right, to a different issue, right? It may be due to a disability. On that Padlet, by the way, there's also a nice chart. Obviously, it doesn't contain all the languages in the world, but it does show you, it will say some things like, some different sounds that might be different or not. Like they'll say that, Vietnamese does not have this sound, or it might say something like, this language does not use articles. So when the kid is dropping, it doesn't say the, like definite articles for things, or sometimes indefinite articles for things. You find out they're not present in the first language, right? It also means like even when a teacher's doing something simple like a running record with a student, like why are they dropping that S, right? Are they French speaking, in which case there is an S in the plural, but you don't pronounce it, like ever? Is it that they're Mandarin speaking, and they do not um, add any kind of morpheme for a plural? I once had a Chinese instructor tell me that um, it was quite funny because he said, people say that we sound primitive because we will say to book, because it takes us a long time to learn to say two books, right? And add that morpheme S sound. He said, we think you are primitive. I just told you there are two. Why do you need an S at the end to let you know there are more than one, right? So again, it's joking there, but like every language has its different growth and difference. So there is a document on there that will help you with some of those things. But if you find it something like Spanish, which says all the letters, it always pronounces, except for the H, I know, but pretty much pronounces everything, um, then there might be something else going on, right? So knowing something or finding out about the background of the language can really help. Here's a spelling example. Okay. So a student is misspelling words, right? So again, a lot of times if it's due to second language acquisition, it's because you see them, like I had a kid spelling mind in English, M-A-I-N-D, mind. But that I gives you that kind of almost gives you the long I in English, right? And once they really get that the I in English is just saying the I on its own when it's a long vowel, then that kind of behavior decreases. But then if they're having other kinds of issues, like just like missing the medial part completely, which again, as we know, is also developmental. So I'm not like specifying the age of the kid right here, right? Um, or there are sounds that are similar in their language. Like I just told you, the Spanish are going to pronounce S at the end, any Spanish speaker, all the words, and something's not happening there then. And they're not spelling it, even though they can hear it, then maybe something else is going on, right? Just some behavior. I love this one because, again, they'll have a longer list in the actual document, but inattentive and easily distracted. I have throughout my career dealt with this a lot, and I'm like, do they understand what you're asking them to do? Like so and so is acting up. Does he have any idea of what the task is? Even if he understands the task, is the reading you gave him have any support so that he can actually read it, or did you just, give him a grade level text under his nose with no other supports and are hoping that he can answer the questions on it, right? So um, often, I will say for our multilingual learners, the case is that the material has not been adjusted or scaffolded for their English language proficiency level, right? But if you're sitting then, and this was also what we were talking about earlier, having students across and observing them across context. Now, if you're in the ELD classroom and we're sure that we're making this available at their English language proficiency level, so the language should be comprehensible and the task should be comprehensible to them, if they continue to be inattentive there, and again, obviously we ask about the home as well and in other environments, but seeing that could determine the difference. Here's just another one example, being unable to orally retell a story. Did they not understand the story because it didn't match their English language proficiency level? Or is this something that they can't do in their first language either, right? Is it something that they struggle with? So coming off of that here, so what can we do about some of these things, right? Um, and one of the things on the Padlet, oh, and thank you for dropping the link in there, whoever did that, because I will do that again at the end, but hopefully you can all get there with that. On the Padlet, there is this about dynamic assessment, and this can be one of the best kind of informal things that you can do if you're worried about a student who you don't think is making reasonable progress, right? And it is a just, a test, teach, test situation. It's making a short cycle, generally speaking. Um, and it's really looking at how much effort was put forth by the adult in the room to affect the change. Okay. So I'm going to give you a couple different examples of this. So one, I had a child who was with us. He had spent all of kindergarten with us. We already had red flags. Like I was called they started to refer to me as his school mother because his mother, his real true mother, when he first started speaking Arabic, she was the only one who understood him in the home. Okay. His father couldn't at first. So again, happening in native language, a little bit of red flag. I was the first person when he started to say things in English, because of the amount of time I spent with him, was able to understand him in English. I was probably the only person in the school who could for a while. So, like I say, already red flags there, right? Because that happened in both languages. But when we get to letter identification, he did learn all his letters. We were already at the beginning of first grade. He'd been with us over a year. And when I'm not even talking letter sounds now, just identification, including typeset G and typeset A in lowercase. So what are we talking about? 54, 56 letters. Um, but to do that, it took 8 weeks of 45 minutes a day. Not in a row, but between me and a paraeducator, we would be doing, the different things like making letters with clay, like identifying this, like tracing it in sand, like, all the different things. Um, And it still wasn't reasonable progress. I mean, of course, we celebrated his success. We were all excited. We did, but it became part of the write-up because at where he was and at that age and with all of the supports he had had, um, that still was not reasonable progress, right? I realize that that's not part of the short cycle one, but you can also do the kind of thing within a week. So I did have an older student once too, who we were kind of looking at first grade math. So, first you're like, okay, so there's might be some limited or interrupted formal education, but he had trouble. He couldn't count on. He could identify a number, um, numbers up through about 12. He could tell you which one was greater. So when I would ask him to start with the larger number or the greater number, he could start there and then count on. So if we said like 8 plus 3, he'd say that recognize 8 was bigger. So then he'd do his fingers or counters or something and go 9, 10, 11, right? And then meet with him 2 days later and have to reteach him that. And that was, kind of constant. So nothing stayed there. So obviously that was a red flag. So these are the kind of things that we can start with to kind of see both, can the student, first of all, master the skill or concept? And then even if they do, how much effort was required? Because obviously, if you need one-on-one that intense all the time, then probably it's due to another reason. Here is again just some things when we're looking at students, multilingual learners with suspected disabilities, um, to kind of take and consider. We do have some problems because what we would really like to see, obviously, is things that are made to be given and, are valid and reliable in a certain language. We don't always have that. So first of all, if we're looking like in that blue box, if we're choosing some informal assessment tool, such as dynamic assessment or anything else, right? What can we be doing to kind of make the process the same? Well, at least when we're talking about it and planning it, carrying it out, and then reporting on it, we can do that in the same way, no matter what tool we're losing, to try to give some consistency to the whole procedure and process, right? So how we describe the tasks, how we presented the tasks, describe that, the student responses. Again, initially not trying to analyze the response, but just say what the student did, right? Sort of a more objective fact. This happened, they did this, they looked this way, whatever it was. And then, kind of coming up for a form to analyze and draw the conclusions from these behaviors, right? So when I talked about that student who I had to reteach each time how to count on, like if I were doing that, I would be talking about the student's responses or where we started again, or what I said and how he responded and what I did and how he responded, right? Each time. as part of that write-up afterwards. Looking at culturally responsive assessment practices, again, dynamic assessment can be one of those. And just kind of looking at different things that you can do, like building that trust with the families to be able to give an in-depth caregiver interview, um, doing what you can in each language, or sometimes a mix of languages. Again, like we said, sometimes if the instruction was only in English, how much of the native language is going to be a support? Yet it might be at times. So, how can we play with that? Using portfolios, right, to really be able to show progress, or sometimes, unfortunately, lack thereof. And using trained and skilled interpreters. At WRESA, we can even talk to you. There is some stuff on the Padlet around that as well, but it's really trained and skilled. It's not just anybody. Um, Sometimes it's someone who already works in your district, and that can be good. I would be a little careful about that though, because I know sometimes like paraeducators are relied on, and some of that can be good because they're part of the community, but that also sometimes shuts families down because they don't want the whole community knowing their business. And even if they know that they're bound by FERPA, they might not feel comfortable with that. Um, and just an interpreter, if you're actually doing an evaluation, whether it's informal or formal, is not accidentally giving anything away to the student, right? Or making them feel like they can't do things. So it's really having people who know what they're doing and meeting with them before and after to talk about what's going on there, right? This is the protocol that I mentioned, a sample one from Oakland Schools, which is on that Padlet. Again, I can drop that in the chat later, but it's also linked on the slide deck that someone shared with you again. Thank you again. Um, and what I like about this is you do have ways to go like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. But if not, we're looking that this is what happens, right? So when you come in, and I will double check this document because like I'm looking at this right now, that it does link to the Michigan Home Language Survey. I'm going to make sure it's linked to the new one and some things like that because one just came out for use this year. Um, but when we look at these things, first of all, were they determined? Then what kind of supports are they given? How is their progress, right? And then if you look at level 4, when you're actually in the document, there's just a lot around that, right? Um, to kind of start teasing out, like when we saw those behaviors, that the exact same behavior could be due to language acquisition or could be due to a disability, then we really have to tease that out via dynamic assessment and other procedures, right? And then when I say that do not pass go and all that, that again is we've got something big, like we said, the walking stick and the seeing eye dog, the stutter, someone who comes in with the equivalent of an IEP from their home country. That should go, even if it's not exactly the same, like take a look at that and what's happening with that. And, that should really go straight to evaluation. So there are certain things that, show up where you go all the way to step 6, right? But if you've already built these collaborative teams, I mean, I know it's going to happen both ways. To be proactive, some stuff may happen, or like we said, getting together and learning about each other's areas of expertise, coming to common understandings, creating district protocols, and then also, oh, the kid's here. What can we do? Talk to me, ask me questions. What's going on? But all of these things can lead, once you start these collaborative processes, like step 4 and 5, like really working through what might be happening. Okay, what are our next steps? That's just going to become more and more seamless as time goes on because you'll have built these relationships and had these experiences together. So again, huge plug for our half day on October 2nd in the afternoon. And our collaborative team of 4 will be there. We would love to see you with collaborative teams. And we would really think that the power of partnership is magical and is vital to really find out what's going on with our students and then giving them the supports they need while also welcoming them and looking at them through an assets-based lens and really giving shout outs to their strengths and taking advantage of those. So as you leave, and I will drop, I know a couple people might have come in after the attendance link. I will drop that in the chat in just a moment. But as you leave, if you'd be so kind, if you have a goal for this year, maybe around these things. Um, and someone in the chat has also mentioned that yes, not all languages use what we call the Latin alphabet, which is what English and Spanish and a bunch use. You can have the Cyrillic alphabet, you can have characters, and also other alphabets, from Eastern nations. And obviously Arabic, we have different things like reading right to left as opposed left to right. There can be lots of differences in that as well. Thank you for lifting that. So if you'd like to leave a goal before you leave, that would be great, but I will drop both the attendance link and let me find that again. In case you didn't get to fill it out. And I will directly drop the link again. It's a tiny URL / Blitz partnership if you're trying, but that's the link for the slides. And we'll get that Padlet link for you too. And the resource Padlet. So thank you all for being here today. Yes. And it's free. That helps. I mean, sometimes, not always, but sometimes I know like the need for subs, often keeps gen ed teachers and core content teachers in the classroom. But sometimes ELD staff and special ed staff don't need subs. And so sometimes you can manage to get away that way too. Well, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I prefer to be with my team, but thank you for that. I will make sure to stop the recording there.